What's going on? This video is for Willie, or everyone, about Willie asking what can be done to support the channel. And that makes me feel really good. Feels rewarding. I appreciate Willie. And, I get it too. Especially when I first started out, you're just trying to get all the information you can. It's not it's always been a niche hobby, and then especially if you get into giant scale, it's even more niche. And yeah, and there are experts in giant scale, in XA, in iMac, but you don't always get them to tell you everything they know. If you can get them to tell you anything at all. They could be pretty guarded about that stuff, act like they're telling you, but they're really not. So there's a lot of this stuff that it is hard to get good info on. I haven't started out 22 years ago, and 23 years ago now, almost 22 and a half. And it was June 2001. I was in Sharper Image, and they had what was called a Firebird, I think. It was a little stick plane. I don't know, maybe 20 inches, maybe 18 inches. And it had a radio and a battery and the whole shebang, and it was $90. And the guy said it flew. You could control it in the air. And I remember growing up as a kid watching Gigantor, The Eighth Man, all those other shows, but Gigantor, where the kid controlled the robot and flew him around in the air. And I go, really? You can fly that thing in the air? And I was 41 years old, but I was like, and he goes, yeah, you could do it. So I took and bought one, and you had to tape it together with some tape. They included tape, and then chucked it in the air. It flew about 20 feet, and then it crashed and piled up. And that was pretty cool. So then I got a trainer. I went to the hobby store instead of going to Sharper Image. And then I went to the hobby store. I looked it up. And they had some planes, so I got a big Hanger 9 Glow trainer. I forget the wingspan. I think it was 64 inches, I want to say. It was a really large trainer. And I tried to fly that in the neighborhood. And I actually did. I got it started. That was tricky. I didn't know anything about glow motors. Got it started. Took a while. And then just took it off in the street. Ended up flying around behind houses. I didn't even know where it was, and it came flying back around, and I landed in the neighbor's yard, and I was like, whoa, that was risky. And then I went to join a club, and then that's somebody, I've always said I was going to write a book about joining these clubs, and I've always talked about, the greatest thing ever about clubs was Groucho Marx, who said I would never join a club that would have me. And any club thing, it doesn't matter what the club thing is. It could be coins, it could be guns, it doesn't matter. Clubs are their own world. You don't get to pick and choose who you want to hang out with. It's just whoever wants to join the club, and you're kind of stuck with them. You're gonna like some of them, some of you're not. One of the guys I met early on gave me some great advice, which I didn't take like the first week, and he said, clubs, you know how they are. It's easy to make friends. It's easy to make enemies. The friends you could lose easy, but the enemies you'll never lose. So it's really true. And then you got to rub shoulders with them forever. And then there's the club officers, the boards of clubs. Ended up being president up north, where I started flying in Northern California, of the club up there, and that helped a lot with all that, get that all more organized, so we weren't just talking 2 hours at every club meeting about the sprinklers. We worked that out to 5-minute club meetings and 40 minutes of eating pizza. But that's a whole world unto itself. But you meet, I can't believe how many of my lifelong best friends now for the 22 years that I have because of RC flying. Matt Dunmeyer, Joan Elasco, Joe McBride, Kyle Washness, like my son. These guys that I love, and the list kind of goes on and on, from there. And the guys I've met at the field this year, some of the ones that it's the same field I went to 8 years ago, and then some of the ones from 8 years ago still there that I like, and then the new guys I really like. So I wonder if it's just because I'm so old. I'll be 64 this year. or the guys are getting better. And I've talked about this, but I do think the guys are getting better, because when I started 22 years ago, it seemed like the majority of the guys that were doing it, that their identity was wrapped up in the hobby, and this is all they ever had, and it was pretty niche, and it was kind of their world. And then they wanted you to pay your dues, if you're going to come in. But that's all gone now, as far as I can tell. Like, unless I'm wrong, that's what I see now, is that's gone. There's the guys their identity is not wrapped up in it. The modern flyer that's come in the last 10 years, I would say, their identity is not wrapped up in it, and they don't want anybody to pay their dues. Everybody can get a plug and play, plane, and just start flying, and you're totally accepted for that. So things have changed, I think, and I don't think it's just that I got old. But yeah, I'm enjoying all that. But yeah, I've always wanted to write a book on clubs. As far as channels, supporting channels, yeah, there's probably no need for any of that. It is nice to see the likes. I got, they say that's a disease. You post your picture on Facebook and you want everybody to like it. And that's just the modern societal goofiness that we're in now. So I shouldn't really care, and I don't that much. I'm going to get to that why I do them and everything. But yeah, likes kind of they kind of feel good. Like, they kind of feel like a report card. Like, oh yeah, people thought that was good. But in my case, I'm not really doing it for any likes. I'm not doing it for a lot of reasons. Probably other guys do it, or maybe it's the exact same reason. Who knows? But for me, and I mentioned it throughout this year, these videos are mostly a way for me to organize my thoughts. I'm in here, I day trade, in the mornings, and I'm alone doing that. It's a lonely business. And then I work on the planes, at night, try to have a little life during the day, say hello to the wife. And, you're just alone. And I've, jumped back in with both feet this year, which is typical of me and anything that I do, not just planes. So I've got a lot of planes, a lot of equipment, doing a lot of assembly, trying to, go about learning the new maneuvers and getting better, overall at flying. So the videos for me are just a way to, and I've mentioned it all year, like just to organize my thoughts, clear my buffer a lot of times, just clear the buffer for what's been going on. A lot of times, I'm just basically using YouTube for a sounding board, like, how does that sound? A lot of these videos I delete before, I post them, or right at the second I do post them, because I'll just go on a rant for an hour and then I post it, and then the second it uploads, I kind of listen to it before it's even finished uploading, and I just delete it. Because, like I said, I'm just using it for a soundboard, and I go, well, that didn't come off right. But I've tried to come off sensibly, but at the same time, the main goal was just to organize my thoughts. What planes am I working on? What things do I want to do on the planes next? What plane would I like next? I always want another plane. And, how I'm going to work on my flying. And I know that, like I was starting in the beginning of the video, that it's a hobby where it's hard to get information, especially on certain niche parts of the hobby. They're all niches, but so here's one, a giant scale, especially if you want to do, freestyle. It's hard to get the info, even if you know any of the pros, quotation marks, pros, the more elite flying guys, they don't always tell you everything. And and then the manufacturers definitely do not tell you everything. There's pretty much all of them. They want to look good, and that's typical, with any manufacturer in any industry. They're not going to tell you what problems they have, with their stuff. They're just going to tell you the good things about their stuff, and if things are working, it's a small hobby. They're just trying to pay the rent. So many of them have gone out of business. So they're not even necessarily working super hard on something that they might know is a problem. So yeah, the more we can get together, and model airplanes is pretty good that way, where all the flyers, I hate to say the hobby and in the hobby, because that's so cultish. I always hate that in the hobby. That's like in the original Star Trek, in the body, or the religions that say in the truth. I don't like any of that stuff. So I guess we could be modelers. So but we're really not, especially anymore. We're not even modelers. We fly models. So we're like kind of like RC flyers anymore, because nobody builds. People call this building all the time. I built a plane. You didn't build a plane. You that sounded perfect. You did not build a plane. Some 14-year-old girl in China built this plane, and she's a badass, man. Look at the way she covered and stuff. She's getting like 19 cents an hour, and she would kick your butt on building. What we do is assemble just a few parts. Yeah, there's not too many parts in here, and you're just assembling them. You don't even have to hinge it, or gap seal it, or build a motor box, or set the engine thrust, or do anything, or cover it, or do practically anything at all. Yeah, so we just do a little bit of assembly, is all we do. But I forgot where I was going with that, because it's another sidetrack. Yeah, it is yet and still, even though we're just doing, some light assembly on these things, there's a lot of intricate things to know. Look at almost anything in here. Extensions, like everything. So everything that we do, even though we don't do much, everything is interesting. So what size extensions? What type of insulation on the wire? What type of connectors? That, I think Willie was one of the ones talking about connectors. Yeah. That's a big thing. And see, I was trying to organize this in some kind of reasonable way, but should I break right there to what I'm trying to get at? If a guy was just a big time enthusiast, right? And he just wanted to have a channel, he was really excited to have a channel and on YouTube and make videos, and he needed some support, like getting products and stuff like that, so he could keep doing it, and it was worth it to everybody because they'd get to see the products and stuff. So maybe everybody would send in donations or something, and he'd do them. That could be kind of an interesting thing. In my case, it's not really that. Like, if you look at the videos from last year, I could get more stuff than I can build, and I'm not even really doing reviews at all this year. And speaking of that, there's so much stuff to cover, but the reviews, the guy asked a simple question: do you need some support? And I can talk an hour. The review wise, if you go to my website at www.joehuntrc.com, you'll find a few reviews that I left up there, and they're all, but specifically, like, they're all cover everything, but I think it's the Aeroworks Yak 5400cc size. I think that's the one where I just absolutely thoroughly cover every detail, and it's many years old, 12, 15 years old at least. Yeah, in that range. And every detail about these assembling ARFs is on there, like real detailed, with real clear pictures and everything. Like, I took a lot of time to put that together, so it's all there. All that information is there. But then, like, this year, kind of the point is, I'm not even taking the time to review any of these planes. I'm not doing like assembly, like every detail, like how I'm mounting the landing gear and tires and motors and on and on, like all the details of it, and showing you how to do like a complete build on a plane, and then showing you all the flight characteristics and mixes and CGs, and that's a review like I used to do. But I'm just basically stuff that comes up along the way, stuff that clears my buffer, stuff that I found interesting, or that I think is a good point that everybody should be mindful of. But point being, on support, I can't even do justice to this stuff I'm getting, because for time's sake. So I wouldn't need support in a way that I got more stuff, and I wouldn't need support to get the stuff I get. So I'm pretty good. Like I said, maybe a couple likes, but that's ego, that's silly. But that's kind of the extent of all that I need. Now, what I kind of broke off on talking about the different parts in a plane, which we might get back to, is that what I've always thought would be interesting to do, like we were just talking about extensions. That's the first thing I looked at in here. What I've always, thought would be fun going back 22 years was, if I had some scientists and some animators, especially the animators, but because I do the science for them, but to show like what I did 22 years ago was start looking at everything was, I just spin around in circles. Everything was more, what's the right word? Susceptible to failure, was not as robust as it is today, 22 years ago, and it'll be more robust 22 years from now. But a lot of the stuff was really critical. And one of the things I did, people having a lot of trouble with servos, and the servos were very weak. So we would run, 18 plus servos in 118 inch planes, that were being competed with. That was pretty typical. It wasn't just me, to get the power we needed. And that brought up, a lot of questions. And, planes were new to being that big, and we're new to having that many servos, even new to that servo power, which was very low servo power compared to today. So a lot of things had to be worked out. One of the first things I did on one of my very first planes, I was only doing this stuff for a couple of months, and I got a third scale plane, and I took all the signal wires off, and I ran those from the receiver to all the servos, and then I ran batteries to the servos. So I put batteries back in the turtle deck that I ran to the elevator servos, and I had a pull, and I put batteries on that, and then I put batteries out in the wings to pick up the wings towards the root, but they were in the wings. So I had all these small batteries running everything so that the extensions were very short. And I don't even think anybody was using 20 gauge extensions then. People were using like 28 gauge, to 22. 22 being the, big heavy duty. So I did some tests then. See, I've done a lot of testing through the years. So, on gauges, and then I found, cause I bought wire, and that's when I started getting into Deans, that the dropout, for elevator servo leads on the extensions, the voltage dropout was tremendous, under just a small load. When you use like 22, 24 gauge, which was really popular then, and standard RC connectors. And I found when I would run current through standard RC connectors, I would run a sustained, I think in one test I ran a sustained 3 amps, and they heated up, dramatically, and the voltage dropout was dramatic too. So I went to the Deans, they didn't heat up, no voltage dropout. And then I went to 20 gauge on the wire. So I had to get my own wire, and I got 20 gauge wire, and then even, all the RC wire was flat. So I got twisted wire because we had so much more trouble with interference before 2.4. So the twisted wire really helped with all that. So I got 20 twisted gauge, I got Dean's connectors, and then I checked and there was 0 voltage dropout, in 4 feet. To the servos, and some of my planes were 5 and 6 feet because their tail moments were a lot longer back then. Also, servos is a huge deal too. What I'm getting at, what I'm getting at is animation. Servos, I made a large protractor jig with a 12-inch all thread metal arm on it, and I took servos out, all the best servos from Airtronics, which is gone now. High-Tech, JR, Futaba. I think those were the main ones that I used back then. And then I just took them stock and rotated them to where their neutral was on 0 on the protractor and fixed them. And then I used the radio at 100, 100 evenly on the radio to see how linear they were. And they were radically different. The JRs were crazy different between servos. And virtually none of them were equal travel. The Futabas and the Airtronics were the most dead on. I think Futaba was pretty much dead on. But then you start doing testing on what happens when you use your radio to adjust the subtrim. And that's what everybody does, you know. So they throw the servo in. It's not lined up with the surface because they have the push rods and the servo arms where they think they need them, and the control horns and everything. They think that's good geometry. And then from there, it's off a center, so that they can adjust the subtrim. Well, what's that now done to the travel in each direction? How far in each direction does it go? And what's the transit speed now in each direction? So I did all kinds of testing on that. It was all very revealing. Then that's when I really liked high tech, and they had the programmer. So instead of the radio tricking the servo, you know, moving its center through subtrim, which affected the linearity left and right, the transit speed, and the whole thing, and yeah, so then, and even more. But then the high tech programmer would actually program the pot, so you'd have basically a factory center from there, which gets interesting. Futaba has that now even in their radios, you know. So, and there's different electronic stuff now that, you know, guys brag about the stuff, and it came out 15 years ago too, where it syncs every point. It could sync 100 points along the way between two servos, and but you know, if you can get the geometry set up right, that's going to eliminate most of that and make everything better regardless. So what would be fun, now we're coming 21 minutes in, 22 minutes in, we're talking about, you know, support. What would be fun is to get animators to set up some of this animation for me. And I mean, I've always wanted to do that, but, you know, money and time and headaches. But Don Hamp on RC Air, he's got some of this for at least servo linkage setups, which is really cool to see, you know, because I talked about it forever, and to see Don show it is real cool. And then recently, the reason I'm bringing this up too, recently in the last few days, I had one of the followers of the site, one of the subscribers, you know, say that he's figured out the protractors now and figured out equalizing the travel, you know, when you're ganging servos. And he showed it to me, and I'm like, yes. And I've had that happen through the 22 years, but it's actually I'm stuttering all over. I'm so excited. It's actually amazingly rare, even though I've had so many videos for so many years and so many guys have been exposed to them, that guys really get it and think it's important. So it's cool to see when it happens, but to show some animations of it, and even, you know, to bring in some science on it, always seemed like it would be very cool. But we don't get a lot of that with this hobby. Like, I'm going to show you that again one more time on the geometry on this linkage setup. But like on engines, I saw years ago on YouTube where a company was checking oils. So they bought, like, I think it was 50 like Honda, like 50 horsepower motors, and they put them all on these exact same benches outside, and they were all the same engine, and they were all brand new, and then they all ran the same fuel, and then they all ran a different oil, you know, and then they ran them all under those exact same conditions for a certain number of hours, and then they broke them down and checked them out. We don't really get to do that. So, you know, we trust a lot, like, what the manufacturers say works. But most of these manufacturers, or all of them, they don't fly. And they're not really doing these tests either. They're just too small, you know, to sit there and do that kind of serious kind of study, like scientific study. I know in the case of DA, and it seems like I picked on them a lot this year. You know, I love DA. I love all these guys. I mean, I don't know, but I can't think off the top of my head that any of the manufacturers or any people in the hobby and all that stuff that I don't like. It may sound like that sometimes, but it ain't true. I'm just talking about facts, figures, and opinions. But you know, with DA, when I got my first DA, which they had just released, they only had 2 engines then. They had just released the DA 100, and I got one of the early ones of those, and I was checking out oils and doing all my homework, and I came up with Redline, you know, and it seemed to be working really good. It's keeping the pistons really clean, and it seemed to be running strong. And so I was talking to, well, the owner at the time, that you could always call and just talk to Dave Johnson, which was awesome. And he gave the best support, coolest guy. His son works there now, Casey. And So he would go, no, Redline, we've had the worst trouble with that. Our motors will break. You'll void the warranty. He says it eats all the membranes. It's got too much detergent. It's absolutely no good. Don't run it. Only run the AMSOIL, 100 to 1. So, I switched over to the AMSOIL 100 to 1, but then that changed. You could talk to DA about this too, that in the around 2000, that changed to where AMSOIL split it off into the Sabre and the 100 to 1 and the 50 to 1, and they changed their mixes, and then they didn't like that oil near as much anymore. But then for some reason they latched on to the Redline, which, like I said, they had just told me, Dave Johnson, the owner, had just told me that stuff's garbage for your motors and will break our motor. Well, the point, it sounds like I'm trying to disparage DA or something, but I'm not. It's just it's the point that, even though DA is like the biggest manufacturer in the United States of motors, even they don't have the time to sit there and do these kind of scientific tests, where they just go out and take all the oils that are available today and take a bunch of their motors and put them in identical conditions and run them all, to failure, or run them all for a certain amount of hours and break them down and check. Like, who's got time for that? Ain't nobody got time for that. So it just doesn't happen. So you get your information where you can, and you definitely trust yourself more than you trust anyone else. No matter what anybody tells you, nobody's really done any studies. And if you got something that's working for you and it's been working for you, stick with that, because you already have all the proof you need. But it'd be real fun to see some tests on. There's been so many motor oil threads. It'd be fun to see some tests on motor oil under those kind of conditions. But who you talk about supporting the channel? What are you talking about there? Like $250,000, $300,000, $500,000? We could do like a really cool test. So we ain't gonna do that. But here's the thing that Don showed linkage setup in an animation at RC Air, Don Hamp. But I'd like to do way more elaborate thing to show. But I keep trying to show this, and more and more you're seeing guys where they're control horns. See these trusses, these fiberglass truss control horns. They're controlling the surface, where they're breaking these things, and they're talking about, they're flying, and it may be, if there's a single one, even then your geometry is probably not where it should be. I think one of the biggest things I see is they get fully extended here, so they're straight. So you have I'm already slammed bevel to bevel, and there's no way for my servo arm to be lined up straight, parallel, in line with my push rod. I have an angle between the two, even bevel to bevel. So you get those things straight, you're going to start breaking things. The biggest reason, though, I think the number one reason guys are breaking them nowadays, they think it's they're flying, but it's their trusses are too close together. Again, I show that slot, the factory slot that I didn't use. I cut my own slot lower, and I put conicals in, because when these things start to bind, they will twist the fiberglass truss control horns. They'll just start twisting them every time. They'll bend them and twist them, and then they, flex back and forth. What happens if you take anything, even metal, and flex it back and forth for long enough, it'll break. So that's a huge factor on it. But then if you gang them, like here, if you go push pull, which most of the guys with a third scale are running push pull, then that's where the animation, which Don does show, which is cool. You can go check out RC Air. But not, like I said, it's elaborate. I'd love to have some like killer animations with some like killer scientific data, which I would show. Like what I'm showing, scientific data is leverages and force, angles and geometry. But if this, let me show you something. Let's see if they'll show in here. If you look down here, you can clearly see that this servo arm, I'll get my finger way down so we'll focus over there, is leaned this way. It's leaning this way. It's not straight up and down. So what that's getting me, I should be able to do this now even with the plane off and without a protractor on there. You should see. Okay, when I slam this all the way to the bevel, so that's as far as I can go with this. This is slammed over. Okay, now kind of make a mental input, since I don't have a protractor on there, in your mind of, how many degrees off of center that is. And then when I slam it all the way around to the other side, you can see it looks the same, right? It looks about like it traveled the same distance the other way, and the angles are about the same, of that servo arm in relation to the sorry, scratching my cheek. That servo arm in relation to the servo itself, you can see it's traveled about the same distance. And in fact, it's exactly the same distance because I did it with a protractor. So what that means, since I did it on both sides of the plane, is that when this is at any point along the way on its travel, anywhere in the range, that it's traveling the same distance. We could call it degrees or whatever you want. It's traveling the same distance when you move the sticks as this one is traveling the other way. So this one's going to the front of the plane. This servo arm's going to the back of the plane, but they're doing it at the exact same distance. And since our transit speed's the same on these servos, they're going to move at the same time, at the same rate. And so the force on this control horn is going to be even. It's going to be pushing this with the same amount of torque that's pulling this one on the other side. But I don't see anyone set up that way. If you set it up just bone stock, you use the stock location for the control horns, you don't space them out, you put the servo arm 90 degrees, you don't take a protractor out, and check. When I checked my earlier planes this year for fun, and I have videos back, if you go back to February, March, April, I just did them stock and just to check them out. And then I changed them, of course, before I flew it. I was getting on the order of like 50, 30. So the problem is that it's going to be the opposite. So you could do it on a wing, on ailerons when you gang to, and then they'd go 50 the same way and 30 the same way. You just have different transit speed, and you'd have a plane that had automatic differential. So you might waller around quite a bit when you're rolling instead of being axial, and you have to sort that out one way or another. But you won't have any binding or anything. But when you have a push-pull like this, the problem is that if this is the side going 30 and the other way goes 50, when this is going 30 degrees, this is going the other way. So this is going the 50-degree way. And then when you go back, that goes the 30-degree way, and this goes the 50-degree way. So at every point along the way, they're traveling at a different speed and traveling a different distance. They're the same speed, but a different distance. So one is going to be stretching. It's going to be trying to pull this apart on one side, and then the other side is going to be trying to push it together. And then when you flip the rudder the other way, it's going to be doing just the opposite. So yeah, push me, pull me, push me, pull me. It's going to be stretching and then pulling it too tight in together. So that's going to be wearing out the servo, but at the same time, it's going to be wearing out your linkage and these control horns, and your batteries and everything else. So, I've said this kind of stuff for 22 years. I've made little diagrams. I have all my reviews. I put protractors on everything. Here's some protractors. Here's the ones smaller ones around here somewhere that I put, on the, somewhere I put on the, here they go. I put on the servos. So you see I've got the servo cut out so I can have it lined up just right. And I've showed all this stuff forever, but there's very few people, it's not that many people that cared. And then there's very few people that adopted it or really started to grasp what I was talking about. Like I said, recently one guy wrote me that it did, and through the years several guys have along the way, and I'll even see some guys posting it all online in other forums and Facebook pages and stuff, how to go about doing it, even giving me credit, a lot of times for showing them the way. But this is 34 minutes about really saying, hey, is there any way to support the channel? And probably not. But what I've always thought would be cool is to do some animations of this so that, the visual is really good. Like some guys, I just barely start to talk about it and they get it. But a lot of people, yeah. And then I think, you see that all the team guys aren't doing it, you know, and blah, 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 blah. But you don't know how many servos are going through, and you don't know how many servos are sending in to be repaired constantly. You don't know any of that stuff, you know. And even if, you know, even if it's more or less fine, you know, why not just make it good? You know, why not make it to where it's not binding? What's wrong with not binding? Is there some problem with not binding? So yeah, an animation on that would be super cool. I don't think we're ever going to do that. I don't think, you know, even with support, like somebody would have to really spearhead that. And then, you know, tests on, like I talked about, the linearity of servos and talking about programming them, programming their potentiometers versus setting sub trims, and just the linearity even out of the box, even at sub trim 0. You know, to me, I've done tests on that. It's always pretty interesting. And then you go through all the different servo brands, you know, and then people know which servo brands are the most linear. And I haven't done this recently. You may find that the ones I'm running, you know, I'm running 961s on most planes, may not be the most linear, you know, but I haven't done that test in a long time. And, you know, things have gotten better. But I bet you there's a lot of servos that would surprise you now if those tests were done. Some of the favorites out there probably wouldn't stack up as well as they thought, and some of the ones people didn't admire as much might do really well. And there's other tests with servos too, like, you know, all these 1,000-inch ounce things now and everything they got. How long does it stay 1,000-inch ounce? You know, is that throughout your entire flight? Is it the end of the flight just as good as the beginning? And when you're holding in a position, like doing a parachute or something, how long is that holding at 1,000-inch ounce? You know, and I don't have the answers for that, but those things would be interesting to see. You know, then we go on and on with all these things. Okay, here I have a SmartFly Micro, which I love to use on anything but 40%. 40% I just don't have enough channels, or I'd use them on there too. Here I have a SmartFly Micro, and what that's doing, I have my Futaba receiver. Bob Ritchie at SmartFly, he sets these up to where they just plug right into each other. And so that's super cool, no wires. And then you plug, you know, all your servos in, just like you normally would plug into the receiver, but the receiver has all kinds of electronics in it, but it doesn't have the biggest power bus. So what Bob has done here is made, and he's given me all the sizes of you could call it a manifold, you know, the power bus that's in there, how thick the copper is, and you know, how much the load that can be spread to. So how much difference is there between, you know, let's say an elevator servo that was plugged in directly to the receiver versus one that's going through on a power bus like manifold that's on much bigger wires. Because see, your receiver, you can only plug in a little 20 gauge with a standard little 1/2 RC connector for current, whereas on these power expanders by SmartFly and others, will it come in focus? You know, you get an Ultra Dean's connector on large gauge wire. So now you got your batteries going into that, spreading the load across a bus. So that would be fun too, you know, not just this one, but by Powerbox, by Emcotech, the Power Safe stuff from JR and Spectrum, Futaba. I don't know if Futaba's really got anything worth talking about, but yeah, to do actual scientific tests on all that, have animations again, graphs and charts, and show what they are really accomplishing. You know, we started doing. See, I've done a lot of this stuff though, like with myself and with Kurt Cook at Fromco. He's the co in Fromco. It's their names put together. So Kurt Cook, you know, we were doing tests with meters on full throttle blenders on third scales to see what we spike to, what kind of current you spike to, so what kind of current you actually need. So all those kind of things, those aren't really done that much, and everybody's, you know, flying pretty well with what we have, so they just don't want to go into it. But I think it's interesting, and I think it would be really fun to know, you know, exactly what's going on. What I love is the digital voltmeter that use on all my planes. Again, from Smartfly, that Bob Ritchie guy. And I talk about these all the time. And it's just a voltmeter. It shows you your voltage. I always have it where I can see it when I'm running up the plane. So it shows me the voltage of my batteries, which is real cool. So I know I don't have to sit there and doubt, when I take off, are these things fully charged, or do they not fully charged, but to have enough charge to have this flight, or am I going to lose the plane because I lose battery power? So I can look down, see the voltage. I can know for sure, right, when I'm taxiing out. I go, yep, I'm good. But also the coolest thing is I leave it plugged in for the whole day. It draws virtually no current. And so it shows that session, that entire session, it shows the lowest voltage in that session. So you might be out having, I think the most I've done this year is like 6 or 7 flights in a day. I might have got 8 one day. It'll show you throughout the whole day what the lowest you hit in flight. So that's really good to know too. You have a problem if you've dropped a lot, like a whole volt. I usually dropped 0.2 of a volt in a flight is all I drop. And I'm flying fairly hard. So that's really good to know. But we could know a lot more. There could be a lot more interesting things on that. But that helps me with that. Tanks, we get into that. Oh, IBEX. This is a big, motor oil thing. What's the best motor oil? IBEC, what's the best voltage per each ignition? We could do scientific tests on that. Again, that takes a bunch of units and a bunch of work. Fuel tanks, I talk about the foam, how thick and how much of a rebound, versus how rigid or how compressed. I like the Dubro foam for the rebound as far as I can tell with no testing, and that could be done. You could put a camera in a plane for all that kind of stuff, do other testing, or you could do it all on a workbench, with like a paint shaker or something. Fuel lines, you could get into that. Tygon versus Viton. What areas? Joe McBride, he was having trouble with his braking on the connectors, which you wouldn't want with the Viton. So it's kind of endless. But those types of things would be something that I've always wanted, but I knew it was kind of unrealistic. And, probably still is. But man, I really appreciate Willie, for bringing it up. And it gives you guys a chance also to know what I'm thinking about what things, interest me and what things, could be done. Someday they might be done. We're a pretty small hobby. And with drone things and war and everything, I've thought for 20 years we're going to get banned. Shh, I didn't say that. But I think, enjoy it while you got it, till we get more and more restrictions. Have fun. Smile a lot. Enjoy. Have gratitude. You never know when things will change. But I keep getting more stuff. Like right now I have 2 more planes to build. Assemble. Sorry. We don't build them. And some guys do, but we don't. Terry's Custom, he builds them. But Brian Huffmeyer builds them. I think Lee in Texas, I think he still builds them. I think so. But yeah, a few guys build. Jason, how come I can't remember anybody's name? Jason builds them. But yeah, most of us just assemble. Boy, I get sidetracked easy. Most of us just assemble, and all year I've had more than I could assemble, and I don't need a camera. Actually, I have a 4K studio camera too, and then I have a really nice Canon still camera, R5, and so I have all that stuff. But for me, just taking the cell phone, just like an hour tonight, or 45 minutes, taking the cell phone. I don't like having my face in it. Now I have old videos that have my face in it. I have some new ones and pictures of me at the field, but I don't want to get overexposed. You guys get tired of seeing me, so that's what happens to me on these podcasts. I get tired of looking at these different guys. So more fun to look at the plane. but yeah, I think we're kind of dialed. Um, yeah, it's a way for me to decompress, get organized for what I'm gonna do, and at the same time, hopefully, share some things that help some people that are kind of starved for information about how all this stuff works. I'll tell you the last thing, since it's so late in, nobody's listening anymore. 45 minutes now in 1 second. Is like engines. When I was running some tech companies in the Bay Area in the .com era, we had some really amazing programmers, and they would get apps from other companies to check out, and they'd come back in like 10 minutes and go, "This app's crap, just throw it away, we're not going to ever use that." And I go, "Well, what's the deal?" And he goes, "Well, I gave it 10 minutes and I can't use it. I can't figure out how to use it, or how to get it loaded and working right and all that stuff." And I go, 10 minutes. And he goes, "Hey, I'm a world-class programmer. If I can't figure out how to make this thing work in 10 minutes, something wrong with it, and you need something better." And they were right. That's for sure the case. And, I've talked a lot about engines this year, trouble with engines, trying to get engines all tuned in the way I want. But one, I've had a lot of engines. I've had a lot of planes and a lot of engines, and it takes some time to break them in. But, some of the engines I've had trouble with, first engine I had trouble with was the DLE 170, which is an engine I used to love, and may still if I had 20 of them and could hand pick a couple. And the ZDZ 195, which I also might love if I could, more than any engine of all, maybe my number one favorite engine, if I could get 50 of them and hand pick a couple. I say 50 because I really don't know on those, And then, I got apparently unlucky with a DA150L, which I could only assume was kind of rushed on the assembly for that twisted crank, and not tested, because there's just no way that thing should have a twisted crank and 8 warm-up flights, eight break-in flights. That's basically one day of break-in. Yeah, that's not good. But the point being, if I'm sitting here asking questions about motors and having a little trouble with motors while I'm trying to clear my thoughts in these videos, I've been doing I wrote, edited, and completely, rewrote the manual for 3W back in the day. I still have that in Word on my computer. I wrote it for them, and then I saw it like copied in like every other manufacturer for the next 10 years. Just used a copy of that manual I wrote for a 3W, and now I notice that there's very little that really resembles that old manual. Just a few parts. Maybe the legal stuff, because I'm pretty good at the law, so I did all that legal stuff too. But I talked all about, how they run, how to put them on the motor boxes, how to cool them, how to start them, how to troubleshoot them, how to tune them, what temperatures they should run at. All that stuff was all me. I sat there and wrote all that. Now they had a manual, that they sent me, but then I just took it apart and rewrote it completely, and it's all my instruction. That's all what I came up with on how these things should run. So I've been running motors for a long time, had a lot of success for a long time, got videos going way back, had a lot of very expensive planes that I was able to get running, fly, and sell, which I'm not doing this year. Like, I'm keeping everything. But yeah, without having any damages to anything, so I've been very successful with engines for a very long time. So if I have trouble with the motor, yeah, it's something with the motor. So rest assured. But that's pretty much cleared my buffer out for this evening, and I just really feel happy about Willie saying, can I support you, because I guess I'm just putting words in his mouth, but that he looks at the videos and thinks, hey, it's nice to have this info. So I'm glad this guy's putting info up. And yeah, I appreciate that. I'm sure that there's people, I have like, usually the videos get between 300 and 1,000 views. So I think there's, 500, 600, 700 people that like to see what I have to say, and they're they're happy to see it. And then I'm sure there's some manufacturers that are happy to see it. And I'm sure there's some manufacturers that aren't. And I have no agenda. Like, I'm not trying to make any of them look better than any of the others or anything. All the, weeding out's been done. Anything that wasn't that good before, it's gone. Anybody in business now, for like airplanes, you got Extreme Flight, Skywing, AJ, Kike, and I'm sure there's more I'm not thinking of at the moment. Comparf, Model Power, Krill. They've been around for a long time, these guys. So, all the bad eggs have all been removed at this point. The weeds have been weeded out. Anything that's left is good, and on engines, you can get good DA engines, you get good GP engines. I didn't get a good DLE this year, but I assume you can get some good DLEs. I've had 3 DA engines this year, and 2, have run amazing. The 215 was a real standout surprise for how it made the plane fly and how good it ran. And then I had that unlucky, 150L deal, but obviously DA's got good motors. And ZDZ, I think if you're over there where you can get support from them, maybe the best motor of all. But with no support here, I shipped. I only got 1 flight, but I could tell you it pulled the plane in a different way because they run bigger props, and that's the same thing that's going on with me with the 125 laser from Extreme Flight. The 215 runs a massively bigger prop, and that just makes it flies the plane, that prop and motor fly the plane so much different than a smaller prop. And this plane has never felt like it did. This model power plane has never felt like it did as when it had the ZDZ 195 on there with that big prop. And it feels pretty good now with the GP 178, but it didn't with the canisters on it. It came with a ZDZ 195 on JMB canisters, and it basically flew 1 flight. May have been the carburetor. We're going to find out someday. That's the tragedy I'm getting to. It's been like 2 months in USPS shipping for $200 to Czechoslovakia. It's not there yet. It says it's in Germany now or something. I don't know where it's at, but that's just not a tenable situation. That's not going to work. But if you're over there, that would be pretty killer. If you were over by ZDZ, that may be the only motor I ran. I think it probably would. But this GP, it didn't run. It didn't fly this plane very well at all on the JMB cans because I just swapped motors from the ZDZ to the GP. And then I ended up taking, you can see those stock mufflers sticking out. I took the JMB canisters off and put stock mufflers. Then it ran much better, flew the plane much better. It didn't run better. It ran great with the JMB. It sounded really good, but it didn't fly the plane very well. But with the stock mufflers, it did. But even now, it doesn't fly it as good as that ZDZ 195 did. And even that was on the JMB canisters, which adds another couple pounds, or at least 1.5 pounds over stock mufflers. So it really makes you think about it. But it's not a viable situation. Look at me. I got one flight, and then motor wouldn't run. Could have been carb, could have been anything, but there's no local support, and that's not a carb that they have locally either. It's a different carb for the rear. And now I checked UPS. It was $400 to ship it, and I could pay that, but I already don't even know if I'm going to use the motor. It's like good money after bad is what I was thinking in my head. Here's the motor. It's probably going to just sit in the box in the corner and never be used. So do I really want to invest another $400? I should just throw it away, And I go, well, U.S. Postal Service is $200, and it's air. Like, how long could it take? I didn't even really think it would take any different time, than UPS. But here we are going into the 2nd month on that delivery, and it's not there yet. So that whole thing, the point being that's not a workable deal. So for me, almost all these planes have GPs. I think they might all have GPs now. And then I have the DA200 on the big laser, but that might get a GP too. But I'm going to try some things. Maybe going stock mufflers like I did on this GP. Maybe putting stock mufflers on that DA200. I mean, all the videos where guys are 3Ding DA200s, they all have stock mufflers, every single one. Nobody's got canisters. And I had planned on stock mufflers, but Casey told me that the JTEX would give me more power, and more power is going to fly the plane better, but it either doesn't have, enough power to fly the plane the way I'd like, or the stock mufflers will improve it. But I'll try that before I give up on that whole combo. And I've tried like 3 props already, but I'll try like 6 or 8. I'll try every prop going, but I've tried started with a 3112, then a 3013, then a 3211, and I'm gonna try. I ordered, and I think I just got it. Yeah, I just picked it up. It's right back there. A standard 3210 Falcon. I'm gonna try that, and then I have a 3210 wide. So I'll have tried 5 or 6 props, but they're not making any big difference. I mean, the motor just it has no bottom end. And in past experience with most canisters, that's the trade-off. You lose bottom end with canisters. And some top end with canisters in a lot of circumstances. But I guess in this circumstance with the DA200 and the JTEC canisters, you gain some top end. But I'm not thinking you do gain the bottom end. But I'm going to find out. Casey told me it in case. Casey knows more about the DA200 than me because I know 0. So if he knows an iota, he knows more than me because I don't know anything about that motor. But I'll try those and give that a whirl. And it may be that that's just the fun plane to take out sometimes that has that really cool motor that sounds really cool and never really performs the way that I wanted. But what's difficult for me on that is that I had the same plane earlier this year, and then I sold it to Dawn, which I still get to fly locally, which has the DA215, which is a heavier motor, and it just honks it around like it makes it feel very light and easy to fly. So that wears on me when I'm flying the DA200 because I know I've just experienced the same plane flying better. But maybe the stock mufflers will take care of the whole problem. We'll find out. Yeah, that's kind of the engine stories. And yeah, I really repeat myself a lot, but thank you, Willie. And thanks all you who, support this channel. I think supporting the channel is the views. When I see the views, that's what I look at as support for the channel. And here's the thing, I could have said all this for a second, but I would make the videos regardless. So if I get the views or not, if I get the likes or not, I would make them regardless. And on my other YouTube channels, which are just, about life and golf and birds, I like birds, different various things, they don't have very many views or likes or anything, but I still put them up, because it's still just a way to organize your thoughts. So anyway, thanks, Willie. I appreciate you. And that's 1 hour and plenty of thoughts. Okay, out.